What is going on, everybody? This is Jamie Busick. I am the CEO, founder, CTO of Virtual Sprout, coming you today from Powell, Ohio, back from Denver last week, where I had a team attending a cybersecurity conference. Got to see a bunch of peers, vendors, partners, get a great deal of content. Stayed at a fantastic hotel, stayed at the Brown Palace downtown. That's where the conference was being held. And I got to also take my middle son out to college, University of Colorado, dropped him off. He's started this week. So been a great couple of weeks, and but back in town, got a little bit of the COVID, got over it. So if I'm hoarse, I apologize. Got a little bit of a cough still residual. So we'll jump right in. Um, this series is about explaining the various controls inside the FTC safeguards rule and the GLBA, the Graham Leach Bliley Act, um, which uses the FTC safeguards rules to regulate financial institutions. So we talked before about who is a financial institution and how it's a broad definition that catches a lot of folks, including car dealerships. They process auto loans, of course, the banks, the credit unions, title companies, mortgage brokers, accountants, check cashing places. Very, very broad. There's a duty to protect and a duty to report aspect of it. And so we're going over the duty to protect controls. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the written information security plan. It's timely because we actually picked up a client yesterday. That particular client, not a financial institution, but having a written information security plan and having solid documentation during a crisis is super helpful. That particular client had a incident where they contracted ransomware, wiped out half of their machines, all of their servers, exfiltrated some of their data, went out the door, talked to the customer, no insurance, decided to just do a wipe and rebuild. But as we're going through the process of rebuilding systems and we're engaging our engineers and trying to pull together the data so that we can do the job, it became very clear that there was a lack of documentation. So it's inhibiting our ability to move fast in time of crisis. And that's one of the aspects of having a written information security plan, is to really know where all the moving pieces are and to get everybody on the same page and to address gaps in the infrastructure, right? So one of the prior controls was having a cybersecurity risk assessment performed on an annual basis. I think the definition is on a regular basis, but we suggest on an annual at minimum basis to do a cybersecurity risk assessment. And out of that risk assessment, there's generally a gap analysis that identifies holes and weaknesses in your cybersecurity or your data protection strategy. So the written information security plan is a document that ties all that together, gets everybody on the same page. And in times of crisis, that plus a well-defined incident response plan are kind of the guiding documents to make sure that you know what to do, who to contact, who to notify, especially if you have insurance. It's mandatory if you have insurance to really know who you should be talking to, what your obligations are, so that you don't make missteps. If you're making a misstep, it could mean the difference between getting insurance coverage and getting a big fat no, thank you, we're not covering your claim, right? So some key aspects of a written information security plan that you really need to have addressed is the first, I would say, it's one of the biggies, is data encryption. You know, where what qualifies as NPI, non-public information, consumer data. What qualifies as that, or personally identifiable information? And then knowing where it is, what system do you have in place to go find it? And then, how long do you need it business wise? What's the policy about getting rid of it or encrypting it, right? And you're doing all that stuff to prevent unauthorized access. One of the things that we tell everybody is that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you're going to get breached. It's way too easy to run these exploits today. So it's likely, if not a eventuality, that everybody will be breached. And then when they do, you want it so that they take the least amount of damaging data off of your systems that could hurt both you and your consumers, right? Or your vendors or your partners or whoever else. So data encryption, having that kind of documented and bolted down, critical. Access controls, who has access to what, under what conditions. It's essential also for limiting insider threats. So we're not just protecting against external threat actors, the Russians, the Chinese, the script kiddies, all the people out there trying to break in and take stuff, but there are people inside your business that could be potentially a threat, right? And the FTC safeguards rule considers all threats equal. An employee that wants to steal data, money, all that stuff, equal threat to somebody on the outside. Probably a greater threat because you are letting them behind the defenses. So access control, limiting what that person or those people in your business have access to. There's a concept of least privilege, which should always be implemented if possible. The least amount of privilege necessary to conduct the job required of that person. So that needs to be documented in place. Incident response protocols. There's a whole plan that needs to really be developed. That's kind of a tuck in to this, but that's a step-by-step plan for responding to breaches. Things get hot. People get nervous, anxious. There's money at stake. There's potentially an insurance company coming in. Having it all down on paper and having a plan allows people to respond according to the plan properly versus just reacting and having all the nerves and everything else happens. Absolutely a key in reducing confusion, ensures a swift and effective response. Vendor management. There is no abdication of responsibility in the FTC safeguards rule. You having a cloud service, and this is a very common objection that we hear when we say, hey, you have a duty to protect all this NPI. We hear back a lot of times, well, we're using a cloud service and it's up there and we don't have any responsibility, or we can't do anything about it. That's not right. That's 100% false. The FTC and all the other regulatory bodies that would be potentially governing your business do not care. In fact, the attorneys, if you end up in a class action suit or a lawsuit, if you were to lose data, which is often the case, they are not going to care. And the juries and the courts aren't going to care. Ultimately, you have a responsibility to vet out your vendors. And what does that mean? It means different things to different vendors. I mean, if you look at Microsoft as an example, almost everybody has Microsoft somewhere in their stack. Office 365 and Microsoft 365 being a very common partner. There is a duty, and if you look at their shared security model, they put a lot of the onus of the security back on the customer, right? They're going to do their part. They're going to take care of the underlying infrastructure, but you securing your data in your accounts is your responsibility. They're going to give you some tools. You may need to bring in third-party tools, but ultimately you are in charge of your security on that platform. That same model is used in many, many, many other platforms and SaaS platforms and just cloud apps in general. So it's on you as a business owner or business manager to understand what your obligations are, right? And to vet out those vendors. And if they say they have certain things in place, that you validate. Now, customers that have PCI requirements and potentially other higher requirements in the FTC, there's, we have a vendor that's PCI. A customer's PCI. They come visit our data centers once a year. They come put eyes on our infrastructure, ensure that we're locking stuff, making sure the doors are secure, making sure that there's guards at the gates, all that kind of stuff. Maybe the FTC does not require that level, but you need to be vetting your vendors. There needs to be a vendor management process and a supply chain vulnerabilities are a very big thing. So that needs to be documented and followed inside of this plan. And then lastly, there needs to be kind of a regular update cadence with this document. It's not a set it and forget it type thing. The threats change. This document needs to change. The regulations change. They just had a series of regulation changes in the last year or two. And so these documents are living, breathing things. We recommend at minimum at the heels of the cybersecurity risk assessment being performed that you go in and update your written information security plan, your incident response plan, and all your other policies and procedures that drive out of that. So some practical tips, right? Just for kind of getting started for those of you who do not have this document in place, this policy in place. Every year, do an annual cybersecurity risk assessment. Start there. Get that done. Identify your vulnerabilities, your risks. Findings should be inform the security plan, right? So I'm doing a risk assessment. I'm coming out with some gaps, and I'm going to update my security plan based on that. The next thing is communicate the plan. Let the other stakeholders in the business know the plan exists. Let them know their roles in the plan. Share it with your customers. Share it with your vendors. Right? They have a role in your security, and you have a role in theirs. So share that plan with as many people and as many stakeholders as possible. Get their buy-in, get their input, and then again, starting with the risk assessment, going into integrating that plan into the business operations. This should be a piece of the fabric of your business. Everything should be done with security first. Hey, we're going to develop a new bank wire process. Okay, well, how do we prevent that wire from going to the wrong person? Do we have the proper controls? Is there a two-party approval process so that we have a limitation on insider threat? As we're talking about bank accounts, even this is not really a cyber thing, but it should be going into your security plan. Think about title companies. Do we have wire verification processes? Think about mortgage banks that may have large sums of cash on hand. Do we have daily limits on wires? Do we have ACH blocks on any kind of cash account? Do we have positive pay on any kind of checks we're running? These are things that are more risk management, right? And as we approach our customers, we come more from the angle of we're the risk managers, not the IT guys, because risk management is more encompassing and it takes into aspects that maybe aren't solved by the latest, greatest antivirus or the latest, greatest SIEM tool or, the best firewall, that kind of stuff. So let's briefly, just at a very quick level, let's talk about what happens if you don't have this in place outside of the fact that it's chaos, like what we're experiencing right now with this new client. There could be fines and penalties, right? The FTC, I would say, is not to be trifled with. It gets worse, obviously, if you have a breach and you have to engage the FTC and they discover that you weren't doing any of this stuff. But there are fines, right? There's $100,000 per occurrence on the company. There's $10,000 per occurrence on the person. So you as an individual manager and stakeholder in the business may have personal liability for sure if you're the owner. And then they get, I don't know if there's been jail time or not, but there are jail time potential penalties relating to just non-observance of the FTC safeguards rules. For sure, your downtime associated with a breach is lengthened out when you don't have this document in place. Speaking from experience, again, from this client, it's probably going to double, triple the time for recovery just because we're having to go do a lot of discovery, figure out where things are, get all the players involved. It's not an easy thing to do when you don't have a roadmap of recovery. Loss of client trust. If you have a breach and it's never good, but it makes it worse if you lose a lot of data and if you're not addressing the gaps. Like again, I think the expectation should be, and probably is at this point, that everybody's going to get breached. There's going to be data loss, but when it appears to be just gross negligence or a disregard of care, that's where your customers and your members, if you're a credit union, they kind of lose patience with you. So this is a huge aspect of it. And then um, the aim is to get the most out of this control. So don't look at this as I just have to do it, right? I don't. I have to do it to check the box. That's the wrong way to look at this. This is a business strengthening tool, right? This makes you more resilient. It makes you, quote, hack proof. And it makes it so that if you do end up in a situation where you're breached, you're faster to recover, reduces stress. It makes you insurable, right? I mean, if you're going to renew your cyber insurance, and for any of those of you who have renewed recently, you can all attest to the fact that the insurance is not getting less expensive. It's going up double and triple sometimes year over year. So how do you lessen that, right? Demonstrating to the insurance company is, of course, there to make money. The insurance company does not want to pay needless claims, but they do owe you a fiduciary duty to give you the protection that you paid for. That's not an abdication on your part, though, that you can say, insurance company, I paid you money no matter what happens, take care of me. Just like we talked about in the shared security model, there is an obligation on your part as the business to provide some level of protection for yourself. You got to put your hands up in a fight. Can't just take the beating to the face. So this is another way to demonstrate to the insurance company that you're taking your security seriously, that you've identified the gaps from the risk assessment. You are now implementing controls in this written information security plan and potentially the incident response plan to close the gaps down, right? All those things go into the underwriting decision and how your insurance gets priced. They want to see people that are going to protect themselves first and use insurance for what it's intended to be used for, which is a backstop, right? So wrapping it all up, I talked a lot. Start with your cybersecurity risk assessment. If you don't know how to do one, you should be using a qualified individual, right? It's called right out in the FTC safeguards. This is not for a lay person to do. Contact somebody that is competent and qualified to do this work. Go out and book a meeting with one of our security analysts, cyber-strategy.virtualsprout.com, cyber-strategy.virtualsprout.com. You can get on the calendar with a security professional, talk about your particular situation, 15-minute phone call, quick get to know you, understand both sides of the equation and see if there's a fit. But get a cybersecurity risk assessment done, do it annually, select that qualified professional or a qualified individual. You really, it's a requirement, but you really shouldn't be doing this if you're just, an IT novice. And actually, I would even go so far as to say maybe not an IT person at all. Like, IT people should be doing this. You should be using security professionals that potentially do IT, but there is a drastic difference between somebody that does cybersecurity for a living and someone that does IT for a living that's doing cybersecurity. Neither person is bad. It's just where the focus is, right? And then, share this with all the stakeholders, customers, vendors, employees. This is about building a community that's there to protect you. So anyhow, I hope this was informative and helpful. If you need any kind of additional assistance, you know where to find us. And until then, we will see you next time.